Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Blaise XPerience once again. You are joining us for another episode on State of Decay 2. Today's episode is episode number 46, and we actually have a very special treat today. We're going to talk about the top 10 melee weapons in State of Decay 2. And it's, kind of surprising to me even that out of 46 episodes, we've never talked about the melee weapons yet. So I figured, now is the time to do it. And I actually have a great guest here to do it with me, but we'll get to that in 1 second. First off, we have some news items to take care of. So our next podcast is probably going to be a pretty brief one. It's probably going to be a little bit shorter than I used to, but I'm going to go over some of my impressions on the Generation Zero beta. Generation Zero is a game coming out next year that is similar to State of Decay in a lot of ways, I think. So we'll get into that on Wednesday. That'll be the next podcast. Our next stream, when you're hearing this today, this is going to come out on a Saturday. So today I'm going to have a stream from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. playing some State of Decay 2 Daybreak. From 1 to 3, I'll be playing with Jurgen, my partner from the Undead Trials, once again. So he's a Undead Labs developer. I'll be playing with him from 1 to 3. And then from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., I'll be playing with Mr. Dart, who organized Undead Trials with me. So that's what's coming up next. And now we do have a guest, like I said. This guest is a Twitch streamer. He is a great member of the State of Decay community. He's someone that participated in Undead Trials, and he's an all-around great streamer, and I love watching his streams. Please welcome to the podcast for the first time, KCizzle. How are you, KCizzle?
I am very, very well, Sir Blaise. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's an honor, to be sure.
And it's always an honor being in your streams, too. You have great streams, and I really love watching them.
Oh, I appreciate it. Every time you come in, man, you add the Blaise spark, the Blaise XPerience to
yes,
my
exactly.
chat and to the kingdom. And so it's an honor having you there as well every time you come in. Appreciate it.
Definitely, I appreciate that. Thank you. But I did mention Undead Trials, and you were a part of that, and obviously I was too, because I organized it with Mr. Dart. So what was your experience on Undead Trials? Did you enjoy it?
Did I enjoy it? I don't think there's words. It was an immense enjoyment for me. It was a dream come true for me, being a long-time State of Decay. I mean, I call myself the first true knight because I've been playing State of Decay since its release as it was a demo in 2013, summer 2013. And I've just been playing pretty much State of Decay 1 for 5 years up until just this past May when State of Decay 2 came out. And so having an event or being part of an event where you got the elite playing, at elite levels and competing and just having a good time. Dream come true, man. I enjoyed it. I can't wait for the next.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And we're definitely going to have more events in the future. So stay tuned to that, everyone that's listening. And it's definitely true what you said. We had some of the most elite players playing. Like, just for example, in the duos tournament, I think some of the worst teams we had, they still had 4 daybreaks in 4 hours. So, like, if that's your worst teams, then that's pretty good.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Elite level of gameplay. Even the solos. You had guys who, it was their first time playing. They were unlocking things still. And, they were grabbing daybreaks and making it to the most difficult wave, deep into the most difficult wave without having some of the unlocked weapons and explosives that some of us who have everything unlocked have. They were making it to them, and it was just some a great, amazing 4 days of some elite level gameplay of Daybreak. And it was a dream come true for me to be a part of it and to watch it all.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that with the unlocks too, because my partner Jurgen, who's one of the Undead Labs developers, he had never had a Daybreak before when we played together. And on top of that, he had like all these starting unlocks. So we did all those runs without any minefields. He didn't even earn his Clio hand axe until like later in the runs. And we still ended up doing some challenges like behind the walls. We did challenges like no wall repairs period without those good weapons. So that's kind of nice.
Amazing. That's legendary right there. When you're a Daybreak player, if you're a Daybreak player and you're listening to this, you know how amazing that is. To be part of a tournament and not have, some of the special people unlocked.
Yeah, it was right at the end of the stream he got the minefield. So,
Oh wow, that's great.
so at least if
Legendary.
he competes again next time, he'll have the minefields ready to
Yeah,
go next time.
yeah, he'll be ready.
But I definitely appreciated him joining the tournament. He was a great partner. I really love competing with him, and I really love everyone that competed. The solos, the duos, all the streams were great, and I really love watching all of them. So I really appreciate anyone that competed that's listening to this. I really appreciate you all competing. So thank you for competing.
Yeah, my pleasure. I got a chance to see a lot of the runs. I got a chance to see you and Jordan's run as well. Legendary, epic, historic are some of the words that come to my mind. Like you said, and he unlocked his deployable mines right at the end. So you guys were grinding out there. Like I said, some historic runs. So I appreciate being invited to be a contender.
Absolutely. I definitely want to give a special shout out to our champions as well. Our solo champion was Fall Down Go Boom. He had pretty much, a textbook perfect run for solos, and he did some very hard challenges for solos. So he is our solo champion, and you can see him stream again on Saturday. He's going to stream with some of the Undead Labs developers because that was one of the prizes. And our duo run, that was actually on Thursday. Sarkoth and Screwloose, they had pretty much a perfect duo run. They had basically no mistakes the entire time, and like the only mistake they had was not realizing something was a rule. So that when that's your only mistake you have is not realizing something's a rule, that's pretty good run.
Epic. Yeah, again, yep. And that's what level was in this tournament, this first of its kind tournament, for State of Decay and Daybreak was, you got people having to have flawless runs in order to be named champion, and that's pretty awesome. And yeah, Fall Down Go Boom. Hats off to him, new to the State of Decay community. An incredible streamer. I've been on his streams and just I can't say enough about his streams. He does some wacky, zany things, audience participation, asking them to do some very, very fun things like play with his controller upside down or having to drive across the map, only driving, things like no backpack. I mean, some fun things that they have him do, and he does them all, flawlessly. So he had a great stream, a great 4 hour run. And the two duos champions. Oh man, I was there for the first start of theirs. And actually one of the players, I played my first trio victory with. And if you're a Daybreak player, you know how hard, difficult it is for trios to get a victory there. So, amazing
Absolutely.
players. Amazing players.
No, they're definitely great, and they definitely deserve their championship. So I'm glad for them that they won it, because they had some great runs. But we're gonna be moving on from talking about Undead Trials though. But just one last quick shout out, thank you again, Mr. Dart, for organizing this all with me. You definitely did a great job. You were a great partner in this whole thing. So thank you very much for organizing with me. I really appreciate that.
Yes, my B fam, if I can chime in and say thank you, you and B fam and Mr. Dart's Broadcast, who's an awesome Twitch streamer, my good friend. You guys put together again. Your second one of the community now. We thank you for putting together such an awesome event, which will again chime in the future because we've put together kind of a framework here that I'm sure other Daybreak players will want to be a part of, and we'll
Absolutely.
add more challenges to it. And thank you guys for starting something.
Well, thank you for being with us for it. You definitely did a great job supporting us, and as did everyone else. I mean, we even had Rabbit and Tall Guy. They weren't even in the competition originally, but they stepped up when we had some people drop out, and they stepped up and took their place. So thank you to them as well. So it was definitely a great event, and I look forward to more in the future.
Me having trials of my own, yes, I look forward to it.
But speaking of streams, I know you have this whole persona with your stream. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? You have the Knights Trials, the Champions Boot Camp. So what is your whole persona based on? And kind of you want to tell people about that a little bit.
Sure, my stream. Well, I'm an entrepreneur by trade and or by passion, and I'm a lifestyle coach. I have a brand called Champions Boot Camp, and that brand is a lifestyle coaching brand where I try to assist people with health and nutrition and overall really transitioning to a healthier lifestyle. I got into that frame of work, a line of work in about 2010, 2 years after I lost my mom to complications of diabetes, and
Sorry to hear that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Um, I was I was given an opportunity to become sort of an online health coach, and that was 2010, and it just kind of blossomed into me wanting to become a lifestyle, kind of overall help people, not just with a fitness routine, but just an overall total lifestyle change to a healthier lifestyle, because it's not just about fitness being healthy. And health and wealth has to do with a total body thing. So I came up with Champions Boot Camp because I believe life is a Champions Boot Camp. It asks of you, life itself. I heard or read someplace actually that says, without a vision, people perish. And I find that true with all human beings. If you're not aspiring to something, your life is really perishing. It's going to the wayside. You're not being useful or valuable. So life itself, it asks for you to be better than you were yesterday, and to overcome the challenges that it presents to you. And therefore, that really is the definition of a champion, someone who overcomes a
Yeah, and
challenge.
I think that's definitely a great outlook too. And I really appreciate that outlook. So I do, hope your business has success with that because I think that's a great thing to actually do. So I really appreciate that.
I appreciate that, yeah. And I try to incorporate that into my streams, and I use State of Decay as my primary flagship video game as I stream, because you can bring that out in its game.
Yeah, and you definitely stream State of Decay all the time. I mean, I think that's basically all you stream, which I definitely appreciate that too. I stream mostly State of Decay, but I do stream some other things, on occasions. But
Yep.
I know you have your Knight's Trials for State of Decay too. So, what exactly is a Knight's Trial, and what are you trying to put your viewers through for these Knight's Trials?
Well, the Knight's Trials are something I'm still developing, because my persona, the way I play State of Decay 1 for the last 5 years, Lifeline, specifically the DLC Lifeline, is, in my mind, I was a knight in a zombie apocalypse. I was an ex-soldier, or I was a soldier who was sent on a mission that completely went south because of the onset of the apocalypse. And now me and my unit, what's left of my unit, are trapped in the city. We're promised evac from, our higher ups over the radio, and they're saying, no, we can't evac you. We need you to do this, this, and that. And, and all the while, save as many people as you can. And so in my mind, I was, a well-equipped. I want to be a badass. I would be a well-equipped badass going around just saving people. And that's my personality. I would do that if that were to happen in real life, IRL, as we say in the streaming lingo, in the video game lingo. So I started calling myself a knight, and I've always loved the idea of knights and knighthood. My entire life, I've always had a love for dragons and the old English lore. So that was the first thing that popped to my mind. I would be a modern day knight in the zombie apocalypse, well equipped, going around helping people to live. I would bring them back to my well equipped base. I would either evac them or train them to be more efficient survivors. One of the two ways, one of the two paths for them to take.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool how you actually, develop that sort of RPG style and you kind of, get really into the game that way because I do the same thing. Like, my people in my community, I kind of have like my own storyline I'm building in my head where, basically my leader, her name is Taylor, and she had her boyfriend who's like their second in command, but he died, and
Oh,
now she's all upset about it. And now this other guy had to step up. So I have like a whole storyline for me too.
nice. I'm gonna have to see if that's in your stream, because I would love to follow that.
I haven't streamed a lot of it yet, but I mean, I definitely have plans to, tell the story more in depth. So stay tuned for that.
Yes, I would definitely stay tuned for it, because I am the exact same way. I run my streams sort of in that way, mainly in that way. I have a legacy that I've completed with one type of character. I call him the Red Leader. And if you're a State of Decay 2 player, you know that there are players that kind of look like ninjas. They have hoodies on with the mouthpiece covering
Yep.
their mouth. And there was this one player, a character, or avatar, I call him. He was wearing a red one. It was the first time I was encountered with one wearing a red. and he was badass. And his name was Ian, and I lost him tragically. He was the first trader leader when I was really looking for a trader leader, and that main community. And it was 85 days. I was adamant about finding a leader, a trader leader that I would be proud of, and he came along. And I was over the top proud of him. Sword play, everything. And I lost him tragically. And the loss of him created what I now call the Red Leader Legacy, where now I select those characters. I wish there was a way to customize characters. Then I would beef up a character or max out a character and then put the red hoodie on him, because that's the way the story
Right.
is told. When you are worthy enough to be the leader of a community, then we give you the red hoodie.
Yeah, that's definitely cool to play it that way too, because like with my situation, I had this character named Gino, and he was a really well equipped character. He had one of the great stamina traits on him. I think it was like just keeps going he had on him, and he's used to like going out on all these runs by himself all the time. He always comes back. Everything's always fine, and one day he got in a bad situation and he unfortunately died, and then my leader Taylor, she's really upset about that. She kind of blames herself that she should have went with him or something.
Yeah, I'm sorry for her loss, man.
Exactly. She's been missing Gino for a while, but she had to
Right.
move on. So
Yeah, we're up to 3 red leaders now. We're playing out Red Leader 2, Legacy, who's a builder, and Red 3, who is a trader. His name is Sharon. And yeah,
that's awesome. And
yeah,
if you do appreciate this kind of thing where you actually really get involved in the storyline and kind of create your own adventure out of it, that's kind of what you can expect from Sizzle streams here. So I would definitely recommend checking those out.
exactly what you can expect. A thorough playthrough. I'm not really quick to try to get my legacy and end the mission. I play it like an episode, like a season of a show.
But as we did say at the top of the episode, we are here to talk about some melee weapons today. And I think this,
Yes.
is a very fitting topic because you are someone that likes melee a lot and you have a code where you only melee juggernauts. I thought you'd be a great guest to talk about melee weapons with.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate the invite. I do know a little bit about melee
I think you do, but
weapons.
I do want to give credit to Hylos for this. Basically, Hylos is one of the heroes on the Undead Labs Discord. He did share a document with me. Him and some other people went through and they actually compiled a document that has all the weapons in it. It has some of the stats in there, and I do appreciate that because it definitely made my research easier for this. So thank you, Hylos, for that document.
Yeah, shout out to Hylos. His document really helped me too.
And beyond that, we do have some statistics on the weapons, and we have like the actual numbers for them. We're not going to go over the numbers, too much, and we're not going to go over every single weapon, but we do have 77 melee weapons currently in the game. Then there's 5 types of close combat weapons. And in terms of the 77 weapons overall, there's 38 bladed weapons and there's 39 blunt weapons. So it's a pretty even split with those, but 77 is probably, a lot for some people here, and it's probably a lot more than you think would be in there, but there's actually 77 in there.
Ton. And you get multiple ones. So yeah, you should see my supply log.
Yeah, and I definitely don't have all 77 yet. I've been collecting whatever ones I can find, but I definitely don't have all of them yet.
Still haven't collected them all. It makes the game so immersive. They don't just give them to you.
And I do want to say later on for my rankings, which we're going to get to as well, my rankings, I kept out all the weapons that were like, Amazon pre-order, Microsoft pre-order, because I didn't feel like it was fair to include those weapons in the rankings because not everyone is able to get those. So I wanted to include weapons that only people were able to find in the world, or they could get a DLC and get the weapon for the DLC. So I didn't feel like it was fair to include weapons that people had to pre-order to get. But we're just going to kind of go over, some of the weapons in the list. I mean, there's 77, so we're not going to mention every single one, but we're just going to kind of go down the list a little bit and, mention a couple that, piqued our interest and, were kind of cool. I mean, you got the Bastard Belos Wood. That's a nice bladed sword. That's, a very good weapon. We have, the Bowie Machete. That's actually one weapon that I use a lot early on because early on you don't have a lot of great weapons. And the Bowie Machete, it performs like it should in early on.
Yes.
You have interesting weapons like a cutting machine blade. That's actually a really interesting weapon because basically they took a cutting machine blade from a sewing machine and they made it into a weapon. So it's not, the best weapon to use in State of Decay, but it's definitely an interesting concept, I would say.
Yeah, I call it a crafted weapon,
Right,
or amongst
definitely.
one of many.
But then you even have weapons like a carpenter's hatchet that you'd think like, oh, I just found this on the ground. Let me pick it up and just use it. And it definitely operates like that too. And I think, the developers did a great job of making the weapons that like, these are everyday weapons. They're weapons that aren't going to perform as well because the carpenter's hatchet, it's okay. It doesn't perform, as great as some of the other weapons. So because it's not meant for killing zombies. It was meant for, cutting wood.
Exactly. And they did do a great job at kind of keeping things balanced that way.
I agree for sure. Because you have weapons that like, if it's a weapon that was made for war, that weapon is going to perform better because it was made for that type of thing. If it's a weapon that was made for like, oh, this is a weapon for, cutting sewing material, like it's not going to perform as well, but it's interesting to have it in the game.
Exactly.
Of course, we have the Cleo weapons, the whole set of Cleo weapons that came with the Daybreak DLC. Pretty much all the Cleo weapons are, very good. There's some that are obviously better than others. We'll get into some of those later, but you have the battle axe, the hand axe, the long blade. You got the Cleo mace. Basically a ton of Cleo weapons that are all, very good in their own right.
Yeah. Now it's interesting. I kind of categorized all the blunt weapons into like 4 categories. There's the common, there's the crafted, like I just mentioned. Then there's the special weapons, which is they're special. They're not the crafted ones. And then there's the Cleo weapons. And like Bowie machete, all the machetes really, the noodle knife, carving knife, the parangs, the kukri, those things I call common weapons because you're going to find those when you're looting. You're going to find those in warehouses pretty commonly and easily. You'll have a ton of those if you just collect melee weapons. And then you got the special weapons like you mentioned, the bastard of Bella Wood. And we got the rebar blade, which is that's in the crafted weapon section.
Yeah, like a replica bastard sword.
There you go, replica bastard sword, apocalypse sword. Those things that you're gonna find in special weapons cases or in special quests. Sometimes only. Those are special weapons. Then you got Cleo.
Right, and then you have weapons too that are like masterwork weapons, which you can find them in the world, but they're basically weapons you have to craft more often. And it's like, a razor blade machete and things like that are a little bit more reinforced.
Exactly. And you're going to get more when you salvage them too. But yeah, they are reinforced, and like you said, they are made from common weapons that weren't meant to be, weapons of war, but that were crafted into weapons of war. So you're going to have more durability out of them because they were crafted.
Right. And speaking of crafted weapons, one of the ones that I thought was such an interesting idea is actually the Mono Gear axe. They basically took a bicycle gear and made it into an axe. I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, and it's a bladed weapon too.
It is, yeah. We also have things like the Grillmeister and the Freedom Ringer. Those are weapons that you got with the Independence Pack DLC. Those are 2 very interesting weapons as well. The Freedom Ringer is like a bat that has, all patriotic colors on it. It's really cool, actually.
With the weight on it, yes. That is a very good blunt weapon when in the hands of someone with the striking skill. It's going to be a dangerous character.
And I know you mentioned the kukri. It is a pretty common weapon, but it's one that, has a special place for me still. Even though it's a common weapon, it does break fairly fast, but I just love the shape of the kukri. So the shape is just, really interesting to me, and I love using them. So even though it's not the best weapon in the world, it's something I still love to use every once in a while.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the shape, because it's that shape that gives it's among the highest bladed melee weapons with a high dismemberment, because it has that shape. That's that shape. And you'll find that if you are a sword or blade connoisseur, it is that shape that gives those types of weapons the ability to slice through human bone a lot easier and, be able to continue to swing and keep going, like katanas and things like that. They are meant to dismember body parts. And it's
Absolutely.
Because of that shape.
And then, of course, you have some Red Talon weapons, too. You have the Red Talon RTX Extermination Blade, the RTX Crusher. Those are definitely some great weapons as well, because our Red Talon, they kind of, made them even better than they were, and they kind of crafted them that way. And Then you have weapons that are like really lightweight as well that are pretty cool. Like you have the ultralight axe and the Tactahawk. Those are some weapons that are, really lightweight and they don't cost a lot of stamina to use, but they're weapons that still perform decent on a regular basis.
I'll make a point about that. Personally, what I use those hatchets for or to beef up someone with swordplay because it's a light bladed weapon. And then once they have pretty much gotten to swordplay and gotten a couple of stars there, I give them something a little bit more difficult to use, like one of the swords, and they seem to perform really well with those
No,
weapons.
I would agree. And you also have weapons that are like bayonets. You have the World War I bayonet. That's pretty cool to, have a bayonet and just use a bayonet like that. That's kind of interesting.
Yes. I'm glad you've taken just a half a step back to the RTX weapons, the pressure, the Interbalan, and the extermination blade. They are, I call them the mid-range weapons because they're just above, they're the high tier of the common and the special weapons, but they're just below, well, they're just below the start of the special weapons, because of, they are red talent, they are meant for zombie war, specialized war, and the RTX Crusher is a very, very good weapon. Actually,
Absolutely.
both
And
of them.
same with the Clio. The Clios are meant for, specialized warfare as well. So
Specialized zombie warfare, yes. Those weapons, that's what I want to look at when we're grading them.
So we're not going to spoil the list yet, but since it was meant for specialized warfare like that, you can expect to see some Clio weapons on our list. We won't spoil the list yet. But you do have some weapons that are great blunt weapons as well. You have, your classic crowbar. Obviously a crowbar is going to be something that you really think would be great as a blunt weapon. You just knock back the zombies and it does the job like that. You have the crow's beak. That is one of the masterwork weapons that you have to, reinforce and craft. And that's really cool to make those at the forge. You have weapons like different types of maces. You have like an ancestral mace that's, kind of rusted. It's kind of old looking, but it's still, interesting to actually use that. And then you have weapons that are like the oversized mallet. And it's kind of funny to, carry that one around, just have like oversized mallet on your bag and just carry that around with you.
That reminds me of State of Decay 1 and the heavy weapons. Because there was that tier of weapon called heavy that you could like barely swing around but would take out, 4 or 5 zombies that were crowding you. And I never ever would use the heavy tier weapons. And same thing with the oversized mallet. That's one that just gets by me because I don't really get into that tier of weapons.
Yeah, but I mean, some people do prefer those type of weapons. So, it's to each their own, I mean, I prefer lighter weapons a lot, but
But I am glad they're there. I'm looking for a
absolutely,
character
because it gives
actually
more options, and I
outfit.
like how State of Decay gives more options like that, where people can choose. Oh, I like these kind of weapons. I like these kind of weapons. So I'm glad that
Exactly.
has the option there. But
Exactly.
you have a whole range of baseball bats too. You have like a wooden bat, a Titan bat. We talked about the Freedom Ringer. So there's a lot of different types of baseball bats that are really cool to use as well. You have things like the tire iron. That's really interesting to use because you think like these are weapons that you just pick up on the side of the street and be like, oh, there's a zombie coming at me. Let me just pick this up and swing it at him. And these are kind of the weapons that kind of like you said, common weapons that you would literally just find as they are and you just pick it up and use it.
Yep. One of the most damaging common weapons is a wrench. That's one of the most max
Definitely.
durability items, weapons, melee weapons in the game. And it's a wrench. It's a lucky wrench, and it's a very, very good blunt weapon. Like you mentioned, the crowbar is another one. I find that wrench is more durable than the crowbar even. It's a funny thing, right? For taking out a
It is,
skull.
yeah. You wouldn't think it would be.
Right.
But I mean, we're not obviously going to mention all of them, but that's some of the blunt weapons, that's some of the bladed weapons. Since there's only 5, the close combat weapons, I'll mention all those real quick. You have a combat knife, a chef's knife, a K-bar, a rusty screwdriver, and my personal favorite close combat weapon is the barbecue fork that came in the Independence Pack DLC. I love just equipping the barbecue fork and just, stabbing someone with a barbecue fork.
With the close combat weapons, they're all the same. They're the same
They are,
weight.
yes.
There's no variance there. It's just the name. And of course, I would want everyone to have combat knives, but there's no real benefit to having them. If there was just slight variance, I'd be happy, but there isn't. But I do like the variety there, the fork and a combat knife and a rusty screwdriver, which is what I send all my people out when I exile them. I try to get them to a rusty screwdriver, and keep
Nice.
their K-bar or their combat knife because that's
Right.
what we want. Who wouldn't want that?
See, to me, I just love using the barbecue fork, and you have to have the Independence Pack to get this, but to me, it's just a lot of fun to use that because who would think, oh, I have this zombie, I'm going to go tackle with a barbecue fork. Like, I went up against Juggernauts, and I've killed Juggernauts with a barbecue fork. It's really fun to kill a Juggernaut with a barbecue fork.
Yeah, and it's funny the motion too, how they put it in skull and then twist. That would be extremely difficult with a barbecue fork. I'm sure the tongues would be well twisted
Yes,
after two skulls.
probably. But
Great
hey, I mean,
weapon
that's
though.
one of the benefits of having them all the same because since they are all the same, it doesn't matter which one it's basically, matter of preference on looks. And
Yeah,
I just love the look of having the barbecue fork with me. So I just prefer that one.
it does look zany and it does add a nice touch to our favorite gun, a barbecue fork. Keeps you
Exactly.
coming.
But, those are some of the melee weapons we have available to us. But when choosing the melee weapon that you want, there's a lot of factors involved. So there's factors like weight, durability, dismember's a factor, impact, knockdown, lethality, stamina cost, and there's also two factors that there's not a lot of variance in the game right now, but there's sound is involved and speed. There's basically only a couple different variations with that right now, but the other factors have a lot of variations. So I kind of have, my list of things that like when I'm choosing a melee weapon, these are the things I look for. What's, some of your top ones that you look for in a melee weapon?
First thing I look for is weight. How much it weighs. I'm gonna be interested in what's it gonna cost to my
Right.
traveler. Um, Second thing I look for plays is durability. I look at the
Absolutely.
durability of it because of we're knights and the way I run my avatars like knights, and we're gonna be um, doing a lot of meleeing, a lot of hand-to-hand combat of juggernauts, some of the most hardest skulls in the game. So we break a lot. And so I'm looking for durability. And then third, I'm looking at lethality. If I can get a juggernaut down faster, it's better. And then I'm
Absolutely.
gonna be saving my character's stamina. And then fourth, I'm looking for impact and knockdown. Looking at those meters. They're less important, but they are in the factory. Yep, those four areas is kind of like the order in which I look in at.
Yeah, for me, I kind of picked three. I mean, like, sound is not really something I worry about that much because if more zombies come, whatever, I'll just kill them too. That's basically
Right.
the way I look at it. So, so
Exactly.
I'm not that worried about sound, but speed, speed is nice, but I like to use a lot of close combat characters. So if I am using those, then speed's not going to matter anyways. But if I'm using a melee weapon, then I mean, I think the speed is not varied enough that it really factors in. So I think the speed is perfectly fine for a lot of the weapons.
I agree.
And knockdown, you mentioned, I do like knockdown sometimes, but I'm more of a bladed weapon guy. I don't use the blunt ones as much, but I do recognize that, knockdown is very effective in those blunt weapons. So I do recognize that. It's just not something I personally look for as often.
Gotcha.
But my list, I mean, my top preference is going to be lethality because for me, if it's not going to kill something I face, then why am I using it? And that's kind of how I look at it personally because I know lethality was third on your list. So we do seem to have the same mind track a little bit. But for me, it's my top priority because if I'm picking up this weapon and I go to attack a zombie and it's not going to kill that zombie, why am I using that weapon? That's kind of how I look at it.
Definitely. I feel your mindset there. And that is a quotient in the actual battle itself because I look for the one who's wielding the weapon to be highly lethal.
Right.
Regardless of what they're holding, a K-bar, a rusty screwdriver, or a Cleo battle axe, or a mace or whatever, a crowbar, they're going to be lethal. That's why that was third on my list. That's why I'm looking at weight because it's the first thing that's lethal to me is the brain of the warrior. That's the thing you have to contend with. But of course, that's
No,
just the way I
I can
look
see
at it.
that.
That's my mindset. And the weight, I'm looking at, I need it. If it's extremely heavy, like one of the weapons we'll probably get to, I don't know. Well, yeah, the long blade. it's extremely heavy, but it's extremely lethal as well. But it
Absolutely.
would, if my guy is or my girl is tuckered, um, they're less lethal. It doesn't matter how lethal the blade is sitting on the ground or below my waist because I can't raise my arm. So that's why I'm looking at weight and durability. I need it to not break while I'm, mashing horde after horde, and then I need it to be able to be swung many, many times.
Well, see, we do agree on durability because durability is my second concern, and
Yes,
durability, like basically, if I'm using a weapon, I want it to last, and that's why things like the kukri and
exactly.
stuff, I do like using them on occasion, but they break pretty fast, so
They
I don't
do.
like using them all the time. So I do like weapons that are gonna last a little bit longer. That way, I don't have to run back to an outpost, get a new weapon, and I don't have to deal with that as often. I want to have a weapon on me that lasts a long time.
That's
And
right.
I usually am smart enough that I take a backup weapon with me. So like if I'm using, some kind of Cleo weapon, I'll usually have a lightweight, like, I don't know, ultralight axe. I'll usually have that as a backup weapon on me just in case my Cleo weapon breaks. I have a weapon to use. So I usually, play smart about it. So it's not going to be a huge factor, but it's still a factor enough that I don't want to have, a battle raging on. There's a bunch of zombies around me and, oh, my weapon broke. Like, that's not a good situation to be in. So I don't want to have that situation happen to me.
I've been in that situation quite a few times.
Yes.
I got a few of my community members will attest that it makes them cringe. That's one of the things that they dislike about, but that keeps them there is I make them cringe of being
Absolutely.
in battles, close call, lots of close call battles, because again the hardest skulls in the game are juggernauts, and I fight them melee only because of the code. And so we are in that situation quite a bit. And I do find that if you balance it well with the character, say, blunt weapon with someone who has striking or sword play, giving someone like that an axe or something, it's gonna increase the durability or the likeliness of that weapon not breaking after a skull. But it's gonna happen, if you're not,
Yeah, every weapon will break. Even the
yeah,
ones that have the most durability, they will break eventually.
they
So,
will break, yeah. That's even the Cleo weapons, the well-made
yes.
war weapons, the zombie war weapons, they break. And when you take them against skull after skull, and I think that's well balancing in the game because it's true to life. Bone is one of the most hardest substance on the planet, and if you're just taking, your this tool after skull after skull after skull, you're gonna have to
Exactly.
replace it after a while. So yeah, having an extra weapon on you, or like me, I know I'm gonna find something looting.
Well, that's not bad then. But my third preference is stamina cost. So for me, stamina cost is definitely important to me because ease of use. That's basically what it's labeled as, and that's really important to me because I want to have a weapon that is not taking a ton of stamina to use. So a lot of these, big bulky weapons, they're going to take a lot of my stamina when I use them, and I'm someone that really cares about the stamina I'm using because the more stamina I have, the more you can get out of situations, and I really care about the stamina use. So that's reflected in my list because in my list I try to go for weapons that have better stamina use and they're not going to take as much stamina. And the reason why weight isn't on my list is mainly because weight, I can kind of counteract that in certain ways. Like if I have the backpacking skill, weight's not going to matter as much. If I have a certain kind of backpack on, if I carry other lighter items, I can kind of counteract the weight of the weapon. Stamina cost when I use it, that's not something I can counteract as much. So that's kind of why I have stamina cost in my list more so. So my preferences be lethality 1, durability 2, and stamina cost 3. Kind of moving on to our rankings now. We did rank our own list for the top 10 melee weapons in the game, and we're going to talk about our list and what those weapons mean to us. Some of the weapons on my list you'll hear me talk about that I don't even technically have yet. I never actually had the weapon, but I have done a lot of research into these weapons, and these are some of the better weapons, even though I don't have them. But I just want to give a couple honorable mentions that didn't make my list. So I did mention that in my list, I kept out weapons that you had to pre-order to get, but when you pre-order with the Microsoft Store, you got the Grass Cutter, and when you pre-order with Best Buy, you got the Skull Splitter. those are two great weapons that if you did pre-order, you get them, but I kept them out of my list specifically because I didn't want to have a list that, anyone couldn't get, because the weapons I have in my list, anyone can get these weapons, whether you have to, find them in the world or you have to buy a certain DLC, but they are available to you. And just two other weapons real quick that I have as honorable mentions. The Freedom Ringer. The Freedom Ringer we spoke about earlier, it's in the Independence Pack. I didn't have it in my list because it's got amazing durability. It's, one of the best durabilities in the game, stat-wise, but the lethality is horrible, and lethality is something that's very important to me, so it was really hard for me. I wanted to put it in my list. I really wanted to badly because it's got such great knockdown, and it's got such great durability. The thing basically never breaks, but it doesn't kill anything, so I couldn't put it in my list. And the Grillmeister, it was kind of the same situation. That is also in the Independence Pack. I do love this weapon. It's very well-rounded. It's got great durability. It's got great ease of use, so it barely uses any stamina at all when you use it. But again, it's got really bad lethality, and lethality is what's most important to me, so I had to leave these off my list because they have such bad lethality that I just can't justify having them in my top 10.
Agreed. Freedom Ringer is cool to have on your back because of the colors and the way it looks. With
it is, yeah, it's really cool to look at.
But it has 0 lethality and max durability. I can swing it all day, but I'm gonna have to be using it. Well,
but don't get me wrong. I mean, they're still fun to use, so I would still try them out. It is definitely fun to use them.
Yeah, about 50% knockdown. You can get them knocked down and then do a finish move on them, but you're not gonna take out a whole lot of hordes with that without getting damage to your person because it's nosy. So yeah.
Did you have a couple of honorable mentions that you wanted to mention that didn't make your list? So a couple weapons that did not make your top 10 that you want to shout out real quick.
The transmission mace. I want to shout that out. It's an awesome blunted weapon. I would put it next to the Freedom Ringer because it's low lethality.
Right.
But it's high durability. It's not maxed out. It's just a tad off of the max, but it does have a little bit of lethality to it, which makes it just a notch higher than the Freedom Ringer. But the ease of use sucks. I mean,
it does. Yeah, that one was hard to swing.
Yeah, it's going to extremely hard to swing, no matter whose hand it's in, and you'd have to have a powerhouse with striking maxed out to really get some good use out of that one. And that's just, specialized character. So it's good to have in the storage container if you run across that type of avatar, but, not just for everyone to pick up. Same thing with the long blade. It didn't make my top 10, even though it's an awesome weapon. It's just too heavy, too heavy, hard to use. The ease of use is actually 0. And, and the weight is way above average on weight. So it just it's good looking. I like it's well made, but I wouldn't give it to a warrior and say, come back alive.
Well, I think, we are going to disagree on that one a little bit because that one did make my list, but we'll get into that in a second. So the Cleo Longblade is on my list, but we'll talk about that soon. But we can kind of just get into our list a little bit. I figure we can go from 10 to 1 and talk about, our bottom of the list first and then go up. So I'll kind of give off, my 10 and 9. You can give off your number 10 and number 9. We can go from there. So My number 10 is the Cleo Mace, and my number 9 is the Cleo Great Hammer. So both of these weapons, they're both weapons that are blunt weapons. They have a lot of great knockdown on them, and they're weapons that, don't have the best lethality, but they're fairly well rounded. I mean, they do take up a lot of more stamina when you use them, but so they're not weapons that I'm going to use too often just because I'm not as much of a blunt weapon user, and these weapons, they do take up more stamina than I would like, but they do make up for that a little bit with the knockdown. So I did think they, were good enough to have on the list, and anyone that does appreciate knockdown and blunt weapons more than I do, these should be on the list because these are some of the better blunt weapons you can use. I figured they, had to be on my list, but they're a little bit lower on my list because I appreciate different aspects of weapons other than these ones.
Gotcha. So you want my 9 and 10?
Yeah, let's do it.
So 10 is going to be the pipe wrench, as I mentioned earlier. 9 is going to be crowbar. I picked the pipe wrench and the crowbar. Both are common weapons. Both are something you're going to find easily starting out. Both are going to be good weighted weapons as far as durability, something you'll hold on to starting out. You won't need to repair right away if you're using it a lot. And, you won't need a workshop right away. Again, it's a good beginner's weapon. It's a good thing to start the list off of. They're strong weapons and they're common. And that's why I picked them. Even one of your earlier missions take you looking for, someone's special crowbar. And I like that. So, that's why I picked the crowbar and the pipe wrench. They're very good, durable weapons and easy to find. They're common.
Oh, it definitely makes sense to me, and they are common, and they are weapons that are going to, really hold up for you early on. I think the stats on them are a little bit worse than some of the weapons I would choose to, as my top 10, but I think they're definitely, respectable weapons that, anyone could use at any time.
Yes. The stats, other than the durability, the other stats like quietness and things like that. Impact is good, but yeah, they're beginner weapons. Definitely beginner weapons.
Yeah, my number 9, I didn't actually mention it, but the Cleo Great Hammer, I think has the best impact of any weapon in the game, which makes sense, but impact is not something I really, value that often, so that's why it's number 9 for me as well.
Yeah, gotcha.
But my number 8 and number 7, moving up the list here, I do have another blunt weapon at number 8, the RTX Crusher. This is a weapon that is pretty well rounded, honestly, especially for a blunt weapon. It's got, pretty amazing durability. I mean, we're not going to go over the numbers here because I have the exact numbers, but it's got, one of the better durabilities. It only weighs 10 pounds, so that's not bad. And it has some lethality to it, and the ease of use is pretty good too. So I would say the RTX Crusher, it's basically a weapon that Red Talon made, to be a well-rounded blunt weapon. And I think it really does the job well, and I think in all the categories, basically, I think the only thing is dismember. It doesn't, have any dismember, but besides dismember, it's pretty well-rounded.
So
and
7 is RTX Crusher?
8. I'm about to get into 7 right now.
Okay, 8 is RTX.
My number 7 is the Monogear Axe. So the Monogear Axe is what we talked about earlier. That's the axe that has like the bicycle gear to it. And this is a bladed weapon. It's another weapon that's very well-rounded. I couldn't rank it higher because the stats on it's not, top of mind in any category, but it's also not really bad in any category either. And that's why for me, it does rank at number 7 because, looking at the Monogear Axe, the worst category for it is knockdown, which makes sense. You wouldn't expect it to knock a lot of things down. But besides that, it's pretty, decent in all the other categories. It's got, fairly decent durability. It does break, a little bit, but it's got some nice lethality to it. It's, got some good speed. It doesn't take a lot of stamina either. So I thought the Monogear Axe, it's a well-rounded weapon that, should be in my top 10, but it's not good enough to be up higher on my list, I would say.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, my 8 is going to be the common bat. Wood bat, metal bat. They kind of are the same to me. One may last slightly longer, not too much longer, but it's going to be those bats because they are a little bit more useful for bashing skulls than the crowbar and the pipe wrench, but less common to find, just slightly less. They are more common though. You'll find them on people, really, people you'll recruit, they'll have bats on them most of the times. But it's a good weapon. It's durable and it's common to find, and the knockdown is going to be great on that. Since we're talking about knockdown, blunt weapon, that's one of the things I look for in the blunt weapon is the knockdown. I do pay attention to it a little bit. And number 8 is going to be that. 7 is going to be the Dance Force Slugger, which is a bat. Another blunt weapon. That is probably going to be the highest end of the common weapons. It's going to be a special weapon because that's something you have to find. I don't think you can Interesting. Yeah, that's going to be something.
No, absolutely. The Danforth Slugger, I have checked out that one too, and that does have the highest knockdown in the game. Tied with a couple weapons. It's tied, but
Yeah.
that does have the highest knockdown in the game.
Yep. So that's number 7. It's going to top out right there in the center, kind of a top 10 of my top 10 list. The highest blunt weapon, Danforth Slugger. Kind of a common weapon, highest maxed out knockdown, and it's mid-range durability. But knockdown and impact, you're gonna get some good use out of that.
Absolutely. And, the Metal Bat, I'm not as keen on that one, but the Danforth Slugger, that's definitely a great weapon. And if you're a player that, likes that knockdown style where you could just, kind of keep knocking down zombies, those kind of weapons are great in a horde because, you don't have to worry about killing every zombie in the first shot. You can just knock them all down and then execute them all. So that does help for situations like that.
Exactly. And I do like having someone with striking and send them out there with a Danforth Slugger or a bat or a blunt weapon and watch them do that half spin kind of Jedi movement, Obi-Wan spin. I really love it. It's a really great animation. I have a lot of
Right,
fun.
because that is the downside to bladed weapons is if you're going into a horde with a bladed weapon, you're going to kill a lot more zombies, yes, but they're going to get a lot more damage too because they're going to start eating you because you can't knock them all down fast enough. With a blunt weapon, you can knock them all down faster, and then you can go around picking them off.
Exactly. With bladed weapons, you'd have to use dodge a lot more to keep from being
Right,
damaged.
exactly.
Yeah. Or you have to be more, you have to dance more with a bladed weapon. Takes more prowess. Which takes us
Absolutely.
to 6 and 5.
Yeah, number 6 for me, just missing my top 5. This is actually one weapon I don't even have yet, but I've done a lot of research into the melee weapons that are available, and this weapon is called the X-Cadaver. And basically this weapon, actually has the most speed in the game. So this basically is going to be the weapon that you use, and it's the fastest to swing. It, is really easy to use. It uses barely any stamina, and it's super fast. So I haven't actually used it, but I've looked at all the stats. I've done some research on it, and even though I don't have it yet, this is a weapon I can confidently say is going to be one of the top 10 because the durability, just for example, it's got more durability than the Monogear Axe. It's got more durability than the Great Hammer, more durability than the Cleo Mace. So it's got, very solid durability. And then lethality, it's got really solid lethality too. I mean, all the weapons earlier in my list, it has tied or more lethality than those weapons. Like, for example, the Monogear Axe, it has the same amount of lethality as that. So basically, this is a really well-rounded weapon. And not only is it well-rounded in a lot of categories, it's also the fastest weapon in the game. Because there's not a lot of variance in speed in weapons. There's basically, there's really good speed and, kind of whatever speed. And then there's, the X-Cadaver, basically, that is in a class of its own. There's only one other weapon that has the same speed as X-Cadaver. So the X-Cadaver, I've heard that you have to get it through a mission. I haven't done this mission yet, apparently, because I haven't found it. But you have to get it through a mission, apparently, and it's a great weapon.
Same here. I'm looking for that mission myself. I think it's one of those missions where you go and help someone and they offer you resources or a weapon. I'm thinking it's one of those because there's a gun that I know that you can only get through that quest. But that's funny because my number 6 is the X-Cadaver. It's a weapon that I also have not used or have not found.
That's funny.
And it's something I'm looking forward to utilizing because I've heard some things about it, and I want to use it for everything.
I do too, yeah.
And I don't want to repeat what you said. Yeah, I'm falling in number 6 with X-Cadaver.
That's funny that we had it the same exact spot. That's kind of cool, actually. No, I have to do more research on how to get it, but I think it had something to do with like a comic book mission or some kind of book trader. So like, I guess it's some kind of mission where it starts out like finding books and then maybe at the end of the chain of missions, like you get this weapon. So I think it's something to do with that, but I have to look into it more.
Gotcha.
But my number 5, just making the top 5 at the bottom here is a bladed weapon. It's the RTX Extermination Blade. And this is a very, very well-built weapon. It's, something that Red Talon made, for killing zombies. They made it, to last. And it definitely does the job. It's only got 3 weight. It's got really good durability. It's not the best durability, but it's definitely better than a lot of weapons. For example, there's 2 weapons higher on my list. It does have better durability than those weapons. But it does have lower lethality than those weapons higher on my list, and that's why it's a little bit lower, because I want a weapon that's going to be more lethal. The Extermination Blade definitely does that. It's just not as lethal as some of the other ones. However, what I will say is, besides the X-Cadaver, this is the next class of, stamina cost, basically. So, like, no, sorry. This is actually a better stamina cost than the X-Cadaver. Because this weapon, it's going to use less stamina when you use it, so that is something I definitely love. There are a few other weapons that use the same amount of stamina as this, but this is maxed out on stamina, and I definitely love that about this weapon, because I want a weapon that's not going to use a lot of stamina. So there's only about, I think 10 or so weapons that have the same stamina cost as this, and this is one of your best stamina weapons. So I definitely love that about it. And then, real quick, I'll mention my number 4 as well, and then you can mention your 5 and 4. My number 4, this is the last blunt weapon on my list, and this is also a weapon I haven't found yet, because I know for a fact this is a weapon you have to get for a mission, I believe. It's called the Fire Chief's Crowbar, and this is the best blunt weapon in the game, in my opinion, and basically this weapon is almost, indestructible. I mean, it's definitely can break down, but it has the same durability as the Freedom Ringer, but the difference is, unlike the Freedom Ringer, this has good stats elsewhere. So this weapon, is the best durability in the game, but unlike the Freedom Ringer, it actually has good stats in the other spots, because it has some pretty good lethality. It's definitely obviously not going to be, super great lethality because it's a blunt weapon, but it definitely has really good lethality for a blunt weapon. And on top of that, the stamina use, it's not that bad for a weapon of its size. I mean, it's going to use more stamina than, a bladed weapon would use, because obviously it's not a blade weapon, but it's definitely going to be a weapon that's not going to use a ton of stamina for what you want. So, and then on top of that, it does have, really good knockdown stats. So I think this is a very, well-rounded weapon that it's going to last you a while if you like blunt weapons.
You know what? That's a very good list. After our agreement there at number 6, we kind of span off. My top 5 have more to do with my personal preference than the stats that these weapons have. And maybe number 2 had to do with the stats and why I got to number 2, but at this point it has to do with personal preference. 5 for me, after the X-Cadaver, is the Uber Mallet. I don't know if anyone or if everyone knows about the Uber Mallet. It's the weapon that's in the game that has a special symbol on it. It looks like an oversized mallet, but it has a cool little symbol on it. It's kind of special. It's a special weapon. I bought it off of Mysterious One and Trader, and it's at number 5. It rounds out. It starts my top 5 list because of its lore, the lore that's surrounding it. And I won't go too deep into it. You'll just have to know it or visit the stream. But
I mean, I'm fine with saying it if you want. I'm fine with saying what a lot of people call it if you want to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We call it Thor's Hammer.
Yeah. It's basically, Thor's Hammer. Yeah. So, and even the description on it, the description literally says it does everything but call down the lightning.
Exactly. And Uber, we know, is a Norse term. So, and Thor is a Norse god. And so, yeah, we call that, and it has Thor, the symbol on it is Thor's symbol. So,
yes, I think a lot of people don't even know about it because they know it as Thor's Hammer. They don't know it as the technical name Uber Mallet. So I think that's probably why a lot of people don't really look at this weapon as much, but it definitely is a greater weapon. And I definitely agree with you. It should, be up there if you're more into blunt weapons. Just I'm not into those as much. So that's why if I made like a top 10 list for just blunt weapons, this would probably make my top 10 for blunt weapons.
Yep, this starts my top 5 list, top 5 of weapons, of melee weapons. 4, it was a struggle. You said the Fire Chief Crowbar is the best blunt weapon in the game because of the stats. My 4th position was a struggle between the Rebar Blade and the Extermination Blade. Just because the personal preference of the extermination blade being the black and red color with the black color with the red stripes, and my red leader that was one of before the Daybreak was released. Those weapons were the top of the list. You know, they looked good and they performed well, and they went color coordinated with my red leader. So, but the rebar blade, because of its stats and its durability, it can't be beat. You can't. I like that blade, and it's kind of smexy too, with the curve and everything. High dismemberment with that one. So, and it's a crafted item, which makes it special to me. So it was a struggle between those two, and I'm still not sure who might win. So it's kind of a toss up between them. So right now, I'll say the rebar blade takes number 4 spot for top melee weapon.
No, I can respect that. I mean, the rebar blade is definitely, one of those weapons that is a well-rounded weapon. So
Mm-hmm.
I definitely understand that. And the RTX extermination blade, I obviously already talked about that. So,
Yep,
everyone knows why that's good. But
that's why I'm
I
taking
definitely,
it.
agree those are, I definitely agree those are pretty good weapons. But, I'll go into my number 3 now. And this is actually a weapon that, you didn't even have on your top 10. But I picked the Clio Longblade, and I understand why you didn't have it on your top 10 because, you care a lot about weight. But for me, the weight doesn't matter as much when you look at the other stats of it because, it's fairly durable compared to other weapons. But what's really good about it is the Clio Longblade, it actually has the second best lethality in the game. So there's only one weapon that is more lethal than this, and that is something that is very important to me. So that's why it had to be, number 3 on my list because it has a lot of lethality. Now, granted, it does, use up a decent amount of stamina, so I will admit, even though it's number 3 on my list, I probably won't use this weapon as often as other things. Like, I will definitely use the top 2 weapons more than this weapon. And honestly, like, some of the weapons, like maybe, 4, 5, and 6 on my list, I might use those more than the Clio Longblade as well. But just because it has such great lethality, I wanted to, make that noted that it is a great weapon. And I think it does deserve to be on my list. Maybe I'm a little bit off on number 3. Maybe I should have had it more like number 5. I'm not really sure about that. It's tough to rank these things sometimes, but
Yep.
I think it does deserve to be on my list. But number 3 is where I thought it should slot. It's definitely possible. It should have been, number 5 or number 6 on my list instead. But I definitely think it's at least top 6 for my
I
list.
got you. No doubt. Let me tell you my number 3. We'll break up the top 3 more stuttered. Um, my number 3, or my top 3 has to do, again, with personal preference, all top 5. But number 3 for me came in at the katana machete. It's more of a common weapon. It's not special Clio or special find. It's something that you can loot or find. But it looks incredible. It's all black. It has that writing on it that says X66, X60, and then small writing word 6. It just looks great. And with some of my warriors and avatars, it looks great on their back. So that's why that just simply comes in at number 3, because it's one of the most smexiest weapons on there, aside some of the other swords. Um, the katana machete. Common
No,
and sexy.
absolutely. I mean, I definitely understand your ranking with that because that is a weapon that does have great lethality, and I think that's among like the top 10 weapons in the game for lethality. So it definitely has a lot of lethality to it, which I like.
Yes, it's very useful. Your number
But
2.
yeah, my number 2. We're gonna go on to a weapon that I use every single time I play Daybreak. This is the Clio Battle Axe, and the Clio Battle Axe. I mean, this is a weapon that is literally built for killing zombies and pretty much nothing else. I mean, this weapon is definitely built for that, and it's an amazing weapon. It does a lot of great things, and it's got a lot of great stats. I mean, I think it's so well rounded that it's going to be hard for me to keep switching between other weapons because it's so well rounded that I'd like to use this so much. And in Daybreak, this is all I use in Daybreak now is the Battle Axe. But it's got a fairly decent amount of weight to it, so it is a little bit bigger in size, but it does have really good durability for what it is, and it's got really great lethality too. It is one of the top 10 lethality in the game. It's not as much lethality as the long blade, for example, but it does have better stats in some areas than the long blade. Like, for example, it takes less stamina to use this than the long blade, and that's one of the reasons I had to rank it higher. And it, even though we're not talking about sound too much, it doesn't make a lot of sound either, so it's, fairly quiet when it does that. And it does have, pretty good dismember as well. Dismember is not something I look at a lot, but it does help you, in the game to, just dismember your foes that way. So I think it's a fairly well-rounded weapon, and I think it's a weapon that I am going to choose a lot of times when I'm playing. If this weapon gets damaged, I might switch to more weapons more often, but it's a weapon that I'm going to be using a lot of times.
Well, I agree. The battle axe is something that almost the only thing I use when I come in to play Daybreak. But it's not my number 2 weapon. My number 2 weapon is funny. Your number 10 weapon, the first one you mentioned, the Cleo Mace. That is your number 10, yes.
Yes.
My number 2 weapon is the Cleo Mace because it's the second weapon that I solo melee and explosive Daybreak with. And to my knowledge, I think I'm the only one to do it with 2 different types of weapons, with blunt and bladed. And I'm only the second person to ever do it, as far as my knowledge, as of this recording. Our good friend, Sir Dart, Mr. Dart, the first one, and he did it with the blade, with the battle axe, which you just explained, the best bladed weapon Cleo bladed weapon in Daybreak. Yes. And that's why I picked Cleo Mace, because it's the second one I picked. And I picked that weapon because it's incredibly, as a blunt weapon, it's incredibly balanced. It has a lot of lethality and knockdown for a blunted weapon, and it's light. It's less than 10 pounds. And so those stats being less than 10 pounds and having a lot of knockdown and lethality, it's a dangerous blunt weapon. I mean, you can swing it a lot. It's easy to use. It's a great weapon. That's why it comes in number 2 for me. And I solo melee only Daybreak with it. It's the only blunt weapon I have.
I definitely understand why that would have some sentimental value kind of to you then.
Yes.
The Cleo Mace, I will say, out of the Cleo blunt weapons, this is my favorite Cleo blunt weapon, and that's, part of why it's on the bottom of my list, and it still makes my list.
I'm glad it's in your top 10.
For me, I'm not much of a... What's that?
I'm glad it's in your top 10.
Yeah, I think it definitely deserves to be in the top 10. Just, I'm not much of a blunt weapon guy, so It's hard for me to rank, blunt weapons too high. The Fire Chief's Crowbar is the only one I have in the top 5 for my blunt weapons, just because I think that is, a little bit better stats because it has really good durability. But the Cleo Mace, is a great weapon, and I definitely agree that as, a weapon worthy of being in the top 10. Just for me, it's not something I'm going to use as often because I do prefer those bladed weapons, and I do prefer that higher lethality, which is not going to have that. Which, we can kind of get into my number 1. My number 1 weapon, I did say that I do like lethality in weapons, and my number 1 weapon is the only weapon in the game that has max lethality. It's the best lethality in the entire game. There is not a single weapon in the game that has more lethality than this. It is the Bastard of Bellow Wood.
Yeah.
And, this is a great sword, and it's got amazing lethality. You can pretty much one-hit most zombies, especially if you have swordplay as well. This with swordplay is a crazy combo, and I do have this weapon, and I have tried it a lot, so unlike like the Excadaver, I don't have that one yet. I have the Bastard of Bellow Wood, and it's an amazing weapon, and it's got, decent durability. It's not got the top durability in the game, but it does have durability that, definitely matches up with a lot of other weapons. And the other thing with this is it has amazing stamina cost, and it's really ridiculous that, this weapon has the best lethality in the game. It also has the best stamina cost in the game. So, like, for me, I couldn't choose anything else as number 1. Like, it was basically a choice that was made for me, because if I'm someone that, doesn't want to use a lot of stamina when I use my weapon, and I don't, want to have my zombies staying alive, like I don't want to have, knockdown, I want lethality and stamina. So for me, this is the choice that I had to make. Like, it was basically made for me almost. The only thing that's a little bit less is the durability. Like, something like the Fire Chief's Crowbar, that is going to survive a lot more for durability. The Fire Chief's Crowbar has almost double the durability of the Bastard Bellow Wood, but the fact that the Bastard Bella Wood can, get me in and out of situations really fast, killing a bunch of zombies and, have no problems at all, I think this has to be my number one.
I'm not gonna argue with you there. I love your number one spot. Um, Again, it's like you said and admitted to. It has to do with stats and looking at the numbers. And from a numbers perspective, no one's gonna argue that the Bastard Bella Wood is, if not the best, bladed weapon and weapons from lethality uh, factor standpoint in the game. Um, and like I said, mine has to do with personal preference and sentimental value. My number one was your number two, the battle axe. And it's because it's the best in Daybreak. It's the number one weapon that I choose only in Daybreak. Same reasons that you just explained for number two. It's the only weapon I use going into Daybreak now. It's just made for dismembering zombies and finishing them. I love the shape, the look. Um, the size of it, the way it looks in their hand, it's awesome. It looks like Thor's hammer flattened out into an axe, a sharp axe, and
No, it's really an amazing
it's
weapon.
an amazing weapon. And that's why it comes in as my number one. My one and two spots are the two weapons I use: the solo melee, Daybreak, and that's why they're there. But the Bastard of Bella Wood, it should have made my special mentions. I wasn't prepared to throw a special mention, but that is definitely one of the special mentions weapon, uh, the Bastard of Bella Wood. It is a special item. You have to find it in a special weapons case. It's an awesome weapon. And,
Yeah, and that goes without saying. Like, this is not a weapon you're going to find very often. I mean,
right.
you can find it, but it's going to be taking a little while to find this weapon.
Yep, yep. And it's not that sexy looking either. It's gray looking and looks like an old World War One bayonet that's been bleached out. But it's definitely useful.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go for it for looks. I went for it for stats, so. It even says in the description, like, this thing is, like a century old. So
yeah,
it's definitely a very old weapon.
Yeah, it looks that way too. So yeah, they did a great job on it. Definitely a weapon that's in my arsenal, and one I pull out often. I treat it.
Yeah,
treat
it's
it like
a weapon I absolutely love, and the Cleo Battle Axe, like, I agree with you. It's a weapon it's hard to put that weapon down, but if it came to the Battle Axe versus the Bastard Bella Wood, I would put it down for that because this bastard weapon, it does have really good stats for what I want, and it does do the job that I want. So, going down our list again, we can kind of just go through our list, really fast one more time. My number one was Bastard Bella Wood. Number two, Cleo Battle Axe. Number three, Cleo Longblade. Number four, the Fire Chief's Crowbar. Number five, the RTX Extermination Blade. Number six was the X Cadaver. Number seven, the Monogear Axe. Number eight, the RTS Crusher. Number nine was the Cleo Great Hammer. And then my number 10 was the Cleo Mace.
My number one was the Cleo Battle Axe. And two was Cleo Mace. My number third pick was the Katana Machete. My number fourth pick was the Rebar Blade. My number fifth pick was the Uber Melee. And then six, I came in with the X Cadaver Saint Gilles. Number seven was the Cleo Hand Axe. And then my number 8 was the wooden bat. My number 9 was the crowbar, common crowbar. And then the 10 was the common pipe.
Yeah, so I think we, outlined a lot of, great weapons here. And, hopefully this helps listeners, determine what weapons they should be using for melee. Because I think, throughout this podcast, we've definitely outlined, what makes a great melee weapon and what, kind of doesn't really matter as much for melee weapons.
Yep, I agree. Trying to pick in the same factors, personal preference. It comes down to what your character can do and what your personal preference.
Right, and that's something that definitely goes into it because you use a lot more personal preference or sentimental value to in your list. For me, I basically just looked like, okay, what's the stats? What is going to give me the best stats? And for me, I'm more of like a stats guy like that, so that's why my list is more based on that.
A man of logistics.
Definitely. That's something I definitely like to use. So
you're the red talent character with logistics.
I would be, that's why I'm really glad they actually put that in there because it's funny. Like, in planning all these events we do, like I'm like the scheduling wizard, Mr. Dark calls me,
Yeah,
because, I do like all the scheduling and I make the schedule perfect and all that stuff. So
yeah, yeah. And that's what I love. That's one of the things about my brand Champions Bootcamp is encouraging individuals to find their passions, what they're good at, because we all have that, That's that each of us have that spark, and it behooves us to find that spark and just do things that makes that spark glow, And if it's logistics and numbers and stats and scheduling and things like that with you, it's just that's your spark. It's just behooves us to put you in behaviors that make that spark.
absolutely. And, that's one of the cool things about our State of Decay community, because in this State of Decay community, we have so many people that, have different skill sets and they have different preferences. And it's really a great community. I really love the State of Decay community we have.
Absolutely, just like in the game, bringing together people with commonalities, but that special fifth skill that you bring to the community, whatever you bring, that value. Everyone has a value to bring to the community, and it is an amazing growing community, growing by leaps and bounds. It's a dream come true for me.
Definitely. I agree. And, I look forward to more in the future, because I can only see this community growing in the future, and I can't wait for more events. So we'll have to, put something together for next event. But I mean, that's all I have to say about melee weapons, unless you have something else, last minute.
Last minute about melee weapons, I would say stop pouring so many bullets into juggernauts. That's what I would say. Stop and pull over and pull out your melee weapon, holster your weapon, and get to know that juggernaut, you know. And let's give him a fair chance because he's not, of course, all zombies, none of them carry weapons except the bloater. But get to know that juggernaut and give him a fair fight in the match and stop pouring so many bullets in. Other than
Well,
that,
just, give me a barbecue fork then, and I'll be ready to do
there
it.
you go. And I'm ready to cook it. And if you happen to lose
Fun.
your avatar, he dies fighting. It's like a knight.
Exactly. But it's definitely fun to have you on. And before we end, I'll give the news items we have at the top of the podcast again really fast. My next stream is going to be 1 to 5 today. On Saturday. I'll be doing 1 to 3 with Jurgen, who is Undead Labs developer. And then I'll be doing 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern with Mr. Dart, who organized Undead Trials with me. The next podcast is probably going to be pretty brief. It's probably going to be like half the size of this podcast. And it's going to be on the impressions of the Generation Zero beta. So I'll give some impressions on that and, kind of what I think, what I've seen from some videos on that. So you'll get some impressions on that. That's a game that's coming out next year. But before we go, Cizzle, how can people find you if they want to find you?
Well, they can look into the notes here of this podcast for one. Second, they can come to Twitch if you have a Twitch account. My Twitch ID is KCizzle, the number 3, and then G. That spells out KCizzle, 3G. Twitch, and you can find all of in the panels on Twitch, you can find links to all of my Instagram, Facebook. It's pretty much the same across the internet. If you type in KCizzle3G, you're going to find a link that you can connect to me with. KCizzle3G. The only one around.
Absolutely. I'll definitely put links to that in the show notes so people can find that if they, look in the show notes. And if you want to find me and contact me, then you can do so via my email, theblaisexperience@gmail.com. You can do so via Twitter or Xbox. My Twitter and Xbox, the same thing. You can find me at Blaise XPerience, capital BLAISE, capital XPerience. I do also have a Mixer for my streaming, so it's just going to be mixer.com/Blaise XPerience. We also have a Facebook group now, so if you want to join that Facebook group, then that will be in the show notes. You can join that Facebook group, and we also have a YouTube as well. So on YouTube and Facebook, if you just search for the Blaise XPerience, you can find our group or my YouTube channel, and all the podcasts will be there as well. So, those are definitely great ways to get a hold of me. And then, of course, we have Discord. So the Discord will be in the show notes. And if you want to join my Discord, then feel free, and you can leave me feedback on there. But if you want to find the podcast and you're not going to use Facebook or YouTube, then you can find it on any podcast app. So that's going to be on Stitcher. It's going to be on iTunes. It'll be on Google Podcast. I use Podcast Addict on Android a lot. That's the one I use. You can find it on Radio Public, Podbean, Blueberry, basically any app except for like one or two that I'm trying to get into still. They're just, a little bit harder to get into. But, that's how you can find us. And I hope you enjoy this episode. We talked a lot about the melee weapons, and we kind of, gave a good picture of what's a good melee weapon and what isn't. So, I definitely appreciate everyone listening. And, KCizzle, I appreciate you coming on here with me. Thank you.
I appreciate being invited. Absolutely. It was a great honor. Thank you so much. The one and only podcast dedicated to State of Decay. Very passionate about this game. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. And, as you said, it's the only podcast on State of Decay. So, hopefully everyone appreciates that. And we're going to keep coming back every week. So every Saturday we'll have more episodes. So, thank you as always to listeners. And thank you for listening to Blaise XPerience.